Before World War II, Latin America had been dominated by rural agricultural societies. During the war, they supplied raw materials and foods to the Allies, and although the demand for those goods increased after the war, it was hard for Latin American nations to regain economic stability. To solve economic troubles, most leaders felt that each nation should develop its own national industry that would provide jobs and consumer goods. However, industrializing meant borrowing money from foreign countries, which put Latin America into debt. The Latin American government also invited multinational corporations to do business in their nations. This upset many of the citizens who realized that the corporations took their profits home instead of investing in their host countries. New forms of economic relations were formed, like NAFTA, which was established in 1994 and economically united Mexico with Canada and the United States. Most countries in the region relied on monoculture, exporting just one or two crops or minerals that were produced on large commercial plantations. Governments began to grant favors to businesses and encourage them to manufacture goods to replace certain imported goods to save money. They even went so far as to put tariffs on imported goods. Manufacturing grew steadily for almost 30 years in the larger nations with enough resources, but in 1980 it slowed. A worldwide recession was taking place, and Latin Americans were not earning enough money to buy consumer goods in substantial quantities. When interest rates were rising in the 1970s, nations like Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico borrowed huge amounts of money from foreign nations to help industrialize. Even though the lenders of the money tried to make it easier for Latin America to pay them back, hundreds of billions of dollars was still owed. The working class took the hardest hit after nations raised taxes, cut spending, stopped aiding industries, and reduced the number of government workers and their wages to combat the annual inflation rates of over 1,000%. When Latin America industrialized, cars and factories led to high levels of pollution, causing many babies to have harmful levels of toxins in their blood. More than two-thirds of Central America alone, millions of acres of land, were cleared to make room for buildings, roads, farms, and industry. Much of the land destroyed was rainforest, leading to extinct species, soil erosion, and dangerous pesticides. By the mid-1990s, most of the nations had democratic governments, and increasingly people began to make their voices heard in the government. Women were successful in gaining the right to vote in 1961, increasing their power in society, but still struggling for full equality. A group of women, the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, whose families disappeared due to government-sanctioned violence, became especially powerful. Workers gained power and formed unions as industrialization spread and immigration declined. They went on strike and fought for better working conditions and higher payment. Industrialization created higher standards of living and better health care for some Latin Americans. It lowered the death rate by causing better living conditions, sanitation, and nutrition. Despite these improvements, poverty was made worse by widespread unemployment, widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Many Latin Americans moved to the United States to find jobs, because by the mid-1990s, population had tripled to nearly 470 million people and is still growing. More than one-third of the people in Latin America were poor in 1997, and that number has increased by nearly 60 million in the next 10 years. Along with job shortages came housing shortages, and people moved to cities to find work, schooling, social services, hospitals, and entertainment. Urban populations often grew twice as fast as rural populations, so governments had to install sewage systems, water mains, electrical lines, roads, and public transportation.
Mexico thrived after World War II. The Industrial Revolutionary Party, PRI, had control of the government and the citizens. Although after not too long, the party became too powerful, and many people felt upset because it didn't allow opposition. After World War II, Mexico's economy was all right. In the 70s, it was boosted even higher when oil reserves were discovered. A lot of money came from this, making many people believe that their economic problems would be over. So they borrowed great sums of money from other countries. The oil company lost money and the world oil market slummed, leaving Mexico in ruins. Inflation rapidly began rising. In addition to the slipping economy, in 1985, a massive earthquake hit Mexico City and left destruction of the capital and many citizens homeless. The U.S. helped by sending money. It helped slightly, and the economics started to relieve in 1996 with government-ordered spending cuts. Many Mexicans migrated to America in search of jobs, but they did this illegally, which caused much tension between U.S. and Mexico. And until 1996, when U.S. granted legal status to them, the trouble led the PRI to lose power, and angry farmers killed one of the presidential candidates of Mexico. Central America also thrived after World War II. But it wasn't problem 3. In Nicaragua, the dictator Anastasio Samsia Dibel rose to power. The Marxist group, the Sandinistas, killed him. The new leader was Daniel Ortega, and he pushed for communism. He took away many civil rights from the people and was hated by many. The U.S. funded a group called the Contras to overthrow him, and it worked. In 1979, civil war broke out in El Salvador between the government and the Fardabunal Mardi National Liberation Front, FMLN. The front was a running campaign of urban terrorism. Anyone in the country that supported this campaign was attacked by death squads. In the late 1880s, the Arena Party won control of the government, and this angered the FMLN very much, and it led to mass violence in El Salvador. This killed 6 Catholic priests and over 80,000 Salvadorians. The Arena Party continued to have political power through all this turmoil. In the late 1880s, the U.S. controlled the Panama Canal and the land around it. There was a dictator named Manuel Noriega, and he was smuggling drugs to other South American countries to bring them into the U.S. The U.S. cut off all trades with him. Then, when an American soldier was killed by a Panamanian soldier, the U.S. troops were sent to capture Noriega and restore order in Panama. After all these events, Central America and Mexico wanted to be at peace, and the Contradora Principles in 1983 were established, and these were negotiations to reduce violence among the regions. Over the years, nations pushed for peace and had a peace conference in Guatemala in 1887 that was proposed by Oscar Andreas, and he later won the Nobel Peace Prize.
In 1959, Batista was overthrown by Fidel Castro's revolution. Because of this, Batista responded with brutal measures, causing him to lose the support of many Cuban followers. After that, in 1959, the U.S. cut all their support for Batista off, and Fidel Castro took control. Castro veered to communism and became a dictator, losing the support of the lower and middle class. He started taking land from the upper class to create land reforms, which made them angry. Castro told the Cubans they could leave if they wanted to, and more than half left and fled to Florida. Puerto Rico never officially became a U.S. state because most people wanted to leave it as a wealth common. The U.S. did allow Puerto Rico to self-govern and create their own constitution. The U.S. started Operation Bootstrap, which gave Puerto Rico lots of money. All Puerto Rico civilians were granted a U.S. citizenship, and many moved into the states to find work. Other nations of the Caribbean, such as the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and smaller nations, were all part of the West Indies, but now are all independent because Jamaica seceded. They went through troubles such as in the Dominican Republic for many years, ruled as a dictatorship until Bosch took over, but he was then overthrown, and the political situation was very bad. The U.S. sent Marines to make sure communism didn't take over, and in 1996, Leonel Fernandez Reina became president, started improving conditions. In Haiti, the Duvalier family ran out of power, leaving Haiti one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. Their economy started slowly improving, but they're still a troubled country, still suffering from poverty today. For many years, the U.S. helped Cuba with supplies and built many properties on their land. But in 1961, the U.S. broke off all relations with Cuba, because Cuba wanted the U.S. to process fuel supplied by the Soviet Union. Both the Cubans and Americans did not like this, so the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency started training Cubans to get revenge on Fidel Castro for doing this. This was called the Bay of Pigs invasion. It was a big fail because the U.S. military support never came. Castro was also extremely mad about this and built missile sites to threaten the U.S. with. Because the U.S. is cutting down support from Cuba, Cuba's economy dramatically fell. The Soviets also stopped aiding Cuba so much, so Cuba was forced to start rationing programs. Things eventually picked up in the 1990s.
Brazil didn't have a steady government. One president, Getulio Vargas, was president for 8 years total, but overthrown in between. After a few more presidents, the military formed a government. The military government forced wages down and encouraged foreign corporations to invest in Brazil. With this, the economy skyrocketed. This is also known as the Brazilian miracle. With the economy's success, civil rights were lost. The government went into great debt. In 1990, a civilian government took place. The president was Fernando Collor. Collor froze many savings and checking accounts. Collor's good intentions pushed Brazil into recession, and he resigned in 1992.
Finance Minister Fernando Henrique Cardoso created economic reforms in 1994 that were so successful he became president soon after. With Cardoso's government, economic production increased and inflation decreased. Colonel Juan Perón rose to power in Argentina in the 1940s, with strong support from the lower class and middle class. In 1946, he became president. Juan was greatly overshadowed by his wife, Eva Perón, who was former film and radio actress. Eva developed a huge following from the working class. Eva's death caused Juan's popularity to fall dramatically. Juan tried to wage war against leftist guerrillas, but died before he was able to make progress. The military regime launched an all-out assault on its opponents. The army arrested and imprisoned opposition leaders. More than 15,000 people were taken in the night by the government and never seen again. They were tortured before being killed. This was also known as dirty war. Like other Latin American countries, there was soaring inflation, unemployment, and poverty in Peru. The biggest threat to democracy was the communist guerrilla groups waging war against the government. The Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement was an urban group that bombed buildings and assassinated police and other public officials. Drug trafficking complicated Peru's situation even more. Peru is the leading producer of coca. Alberto Fujimori became president in 1990. In 2000, Fujimori fled the country and charged with crimes against humanity.
Hey! Can you guys bomb that government building for me? I think that's doable.
What's in it for us?
Yeah. I got money, and here's the bomb. You guys won't even have to get it yourself.
Deal.
Thanks, man. You like a little handshake? Seal the deal?
In World War II, Colombia was in turmoil. There was a series of military and civilian dictators. The fighting between political factions was so intense that Colombians known as Les Violencia, or the violence. This violence became so bad, two major political parties agreed to form a coalition government in 1957. Although Colombia was looking up, drugs changed its fortune. Colombians realized they could make money by growing marijuana and coca and sell it. Unlike all of the unrest in the rest of South America, Chile was a model of stable democracy. In the late 1980s, prosperity returned to Chile.